In this next panel, we will step out of the choir and across the aisle to listen to a unique and important viewpoint from conservatives who are addressing climate change. Tina Beatty was not able to make it today, so the panel will be moderated by Paul Walker. Let's welcome the next panel.
Rod, go to you next. You and I think both talked to a lot of congressional members. I was talking to a friend last week, Republican conservative member of the House, and he said, you know, I'm always willing to talk to the environmental groups, but he said they don't realize, oftentimes they come into my office and within the first 5 minutes they've said 10 different things about the Republicans being, you know, in a cave or not intelligent or anti-science or what do you think, in your experience, I mean, talking with members, talking with people in the business community, do you run into that sort of feedback as well?
Well, you know, the problem with the words that environmentalists use is it's not really a problem with words, it's a problem with the ideas. See, the problem with the words is that they don't describe a conservative agenda. They don't describe conservative policies. They describe liberal left-wing policies. When you talk about, you know, here's some words that really piss off conservatives. Tax, right? So if you're going to talk about a carbon tax, you've pissed off the conservatives right there, okay? If you want to use tax, follow it with tax cuts or tax rate cuts. Then you'll get their attention. Similarly, if you want to use subsidies or regulation, you're going to tick them off. If you want to use regulation, be sure to precede it with the syllable D, as in deregulation, because they'll listen to that. The problem is that so much of the way that the environmental movement has tried to talk to conservatives is to try to convince conservatives to buy into what they perceive as basically a left-wing agenda, right? And the policies, you know, when you look at it, you have carbon tax, subsidies, regulation as the principal policies that support the climate change, mitigation. And there are a few hybrids like cap and trade and things like that, but these are perceived by conservatives as supporting higher taxes, supporting higher spending, and then supporting bigger government. So, you know, I believe that global warming is real. You know, I believe that the proper thing to do, if you're going to try to convince conservatives, is to convince them using conservative policies, right? Now, how would you do that? I'll be talking later this afternoon at fuller length about this, but the Grace Richardson Fund is involved in developing a new idea called clean tax cuts. Clean tax cuts is the idea that with the growing profitability of wind and solar, unsubsidized profitability that you now have as of 2015, and indeed profits in other areas of the clean tech industry like hybrid cars, possibly maybe electric cars will be in that category, LED light bulbs, efficiency, that actually tax cuts make sense. You can actually apply Reaganomics to climate change. You can apply supply-side tax cuts to climate change. So if you actually apply a conservative policy to the problem, you're going to have a lot more success talking to conservatives, I think. So it's not just the language, it's the ideas and the mindset. The other point I'd like to make is that, you know, because so many conservatives don't believe climate change is real, it makes a lot of sense. If you're going to have a successful climate change policy, it better make sense whether or not climate change is real, right? You want to be able to present a policy that makes sense, you know, whether climate change is real or not. You want to, you know, there needs to be a boost to the economy. There needs to be other benefits: clean air, clean water, jobs. So you have to have a package of things that make sense about your policy. You're not just climate alarmism. You know, it's wrong to say that conservatives are anti-science, and that will tick them off too, especially people in the neoconservative movement who are very thoughtful people generally. I think that the part that is anti-science should be distinguished from conservatism in general, and that is really the part that's funded by the fossil fuel interests. I mean, that is a private industrial interest that is putting forward an agenda, and it's putting forward an agenda wearing conservative clothing. But it's not really conservatism, and it needs to be distinguished from genuine conservatism. But anyway, those are a few thoughts that I would share about, if you want to talk to conservatives, have a genuine policy, make sure it's based in proven conservative policies that have come before, like Reaganomics or supply-side tax cuts, and make sure that the policy makes sense whether or not climate change is real or not.
Rod, that's a really interesting distinction you make between conservatives and big business.
Sure. No, I mean, look, Adam Smith wrote the Bible of conservatism, The Wealth of Nations, which is, we believe in it, but he said, if you ever get, 3 or 4 capitalists in a room together, they will conspire against the public interest. So, if you're a genuine free market capitalist, you have an understanding that, capitalists are your hero, and they're also people you got to watch really carefully. Because
so what did Adam Smith say?
Are slick.
What did he say to justify the wealth of nations?
What?
What did Smith say to justify a market economy if capitalists would do that?
He said that basically from the self-interest of the few arises the good of the many. The idea of behind capitalism is if people are self-interested, they will work hard to produce goods that they sell to other people because the other people want them, and therefore both people will benefit. Now, in my view, one of the reasons we're interested in the clean tax cuts idea is because if you use the tax code to reward low carbon energy, for instance, and cleaner practices, you can actually tilt the playing field so that capitalism becomes clean capitalism. You can make it ever cleaner, right? If your tax code rewards good practices, you can give the investors an incentive to put pressure on their companies to do the right thing. If the investor's capital gains tax rate, maybe even their estate tax rate, is going to be determined by how clean that company is, there's going to be a lot more investor interest in making sure that the corporate practices are good practices.
Rod, you and I had a great debate on tax policy options, but when you look at these words, right, this is what we're talking about, right? All of these things, I think, apply specifically, don't they, to renewables?
I think that those words are great, and I use innovation, and affordable is fantastic. Most Americans, are far more concerned about cheap than they are about clean. So if you want to sell your idea, be sure to include cheap in your wording, because you'll get more listeners interested. So all of these words are great, but my fundamental point is that conservatives are more astute than you think, perhaps. And if you're trying to use those words to dress up carbon taxes, subsidies, or regulations, or tax credits, there's still going to be lingering suspicion that you're dressing up a wolf in sheep's clothing. So words are great, but you have to if you really want to get conservatives into climate change, you have to really think hard about what's a conservative climate change policy. I think that the Wesley Clark's talk was very important, because security, national security, is a road into conservatives, and the fact that you use the word American and independence is key, and speaks to the security concern. which I think is valid and key. But you know, I was telling Trammell earlier, you know, Texas has a very unique situation where it's a highly Republican state, and yet they have fantastic wind and solar resources. So, you know, you have these Republican ranchers, you know, millionaires and billionaires and whatnot, and, you know, they want to put up wind turbines. And you know what? They want to get a subsidy for it too. So they'll go talk to their Republican congressman, and lo and behold, the you know, tax credits you know, extension passed last January with the help of the 88 Republicans who have wind and solar projects in their districts. So you know, you've got an entree there, you know, in terms of convincing the Republican Party through those kinds of people.
A profit motive and job.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that the Texas Republicans are, in particular, and even throughout the whole Southwest, the Republicans throughout the whole Southwest are an entree, and through the wind corridor going up through the center of the country, are an entree to the Republican Party for softening this up. But that's not having to do with language. That has to do with practical politics.
Rod, what do you think you're working on over the next year or two? What are the major Grace Richardson objectives?
Well, with this, the clean tax cuts idea is a newly relevant idea that is keyed off of the increasing profitability of solar and wind. It's suddenly much more relevant now. It's an idea that needs to be studied. It needs to be developed. There's probably a lot of different ways this could be developed. The Breakthrough Institute might want to develop it one way. You guys might want to develop it another way. I'm sure there are people in the room who could think about different ways that, what could we do with tax cuts? But, you know, so right now I'm working with the Jack Kemp Foundation, and you don't get much better conservative credentials than Jack Kemp, working with his son Jimmy on developing this. And we'd love to find additional research partners to work with us. So if anybody is interested in, working with us on developing the clean tax cuts concept, you know, we'd be happy to talk to you.
Brilliant. Well, thank you all. We got through 30 minutes of conservatives talking, and I don't think anybody stormed out. Nothing was thrown. So thank you for that.